Well, anyway, I guess I'll begin. You'll get the other show later. I want to say three things because of what happened in starting here is that I was at a congregational live meeting where we waited and waited and waited. And instead of getting frustrated, I said, isn't it marvelous that we can wait for each and one another? So just to say that. And there are our introductory slides. I'm ready to come back. Here we are. The second thing I wanted to say is that my glasses have all this light in them, so I could be seen as your pilotess, or those who know me know that I am so excited about what we're embarking on that I have too much fire within and it's protecting you from that fire. So you can take it either way, but I hope that doesn't distract. So we're finally here. So welcome participants to Roots Alive in the 21st century. Many here today on Zoom, but there will be many others who will be part of the recordings. And I want to say that Kristen said that, well, 300 will sign up, but you only get half. So right now we have 240. So that's great. So there are 255 registrants for the larger sessions before us, including 56 associates and aggregates and 15 partners in ministry and staffs. And we know there are many, many more to come. We come from every congregation in the United States and Canadian federations, including Peru. A sister in Japan will follow us on the recordings. So I'm Beth LaValle, a sister of St. Joseph from Rochester. And after this introduction, Pat will lead us into some founding moments. Marcia will go through the sessions and I'll return with information on accessing materials and then conclude. So I don't know about you, but as a novice in the 60s, when I received the new Vatican II documents, I read them straight through while on vacation. They were truly revolutionary. I fought, as many of you did, in the battles of change so critical to those times and so critical to our mission as Sisters of St. Joseph. In leadership from 75 to 91, I related to the processes for our documents, presided over their promulgation, and deeply engaged in the release of energy that followed. In January, St. Luke, also from Rochester, and I participated in a session with Joan Roccasalvo from Brentwood. We realized immediately that there is new research on our founding. While presented to those entering our congregations, all of us at large did not have them filtered through us or through our many associates. So I called Pat Byrne and Marcia Allen, who are part of my leadership era and known so much by so many of you in so many ways, and asked if they'd be willing to be part of this process of forming the content and direction for Roots Alive. And of course they said yes, and therefore we can be here today. Many of us have participated in Federation 5-year annual events, Spirit Alive, Cultivating Our Roots, the Life Institute, the Bearers of the Tradition Institute, and so many others offered mostly in person, but more recently online. We've all benefited from so many Sisters of St. Joseph and other companions joining our chapters, workshops, and giving us inspiration. For me, and perhaps for you, our gathering over these coming months will be one of the largest of cyber CSSJ meetings. And yes, we continue to believe in the Spirit Alive, uniting us even through technology. You kind of witness our beginning. I express our planning team's gratitude to the Federation staff, Mary Ellen Kane from Brentwood, who's the executive director, and Kristen Whitney Daniels' help with technology. We are most grateful for the excellent organizational and technical skills of our host, chief host, Joan Gallagher from Brentwood, who will be a Zoom host continuing with Michelle Lesher, Philadelphia, Pat Eichner, and Jan McCormick, Concordia. We thank the 40 and more facilitators who will be meeting with Marcia and leading us in the breakout groups. It's been a delight to share with so many of you by email and phone, and your questions and comments have helped shape our program today. As I talk with so many of you and know from my own congregation, we recognize that we are at a watershed moment in the life of apostolic religious. a time that calls us to a different kind of discernment about our future, individually, but more importantly, as congregations. In these times, unlike Vatican II times, we are fortunate to have so many others who do care to be on this journey with us, associates and agrégés, staff, and companions in spirituality and ministry. So today, in this year of Joseph, we embark together on a critical spiritual quest, without knowing where we will be in April 22, when together we process and assess what has happened among us. So the hope for Roots Alive, and you can read this yourself, but I'll say it again, is that individually and together, we be in touch with the living roots of our founding, that we embrace the source of our strong spirituality alive within us today, that together and as a family of Joseph, we experience anew the great love of God for us, a unifying love so needed in our times. With the help of Pat and Marcia, we will return to the roots of our founding, our fundamental DNA, to better envision and move into the future. We hope for the Spirit working within us individually in our own spaces and with others through Zoom or listening to the recorded sessions. Gathered together, we pray that the Spirit guide us into the right next steps for our families of Joseph. And I end this with prayer adapted from the Maxims. Please join with me as you wish. May we be faithful to the grace of the Holy Spirit, listening attentively. May we be given to God by a holy self-surrender. May we empty ourselves. May God's holy and loving will be before us. May we long for and know the great love of God without overeagerness. May we manifest zeal. May we be courageous to undertake what God wants of us and to persevere in what we undertake. We continue to hope even when thrown into hopelessness. May we put aside our old self so we can put on the new. Amen. And now Pat will lead us into some founding moments. Thank you.
Good morning. It's so wonderful to be with everybody here. Many names that I've known from long ago and many new ones too. I'm just going to begin with this reflection basically on our origins. Would that all the people of the Lord were prophets. Would that the Lord might bestow his spirit on them all.
Yeah, do you want to?
We would ask again to please mute yourselves.
Joan, can you do a universal mute?
Pat, just unmute yourself. Pat Byrne, unmute yourself.
Sorry. Would that all the people of the Lord were prophets. Would that the Lord might bestow his spirit on all of them. Those lines from the reading last Sunday stuck with me. And the narrative arrested me. You remember it's that God took some of the spirit that was on Moses and gave it to the 70 elders, and they began to prophesy. And not only that, but Eldad and Medad, who had stayed in the camp, didn't even go out to the tent where the ark was. The Spirit came on them, and they too began to prophesy. Now, scandalized, Joshua urged Moses, stop them. And Moses' reply was this: are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the people of the Lord were prophets. Would that the Lord might bestow his Spirit on them all. Now, that passage for me is an image of the Sisters of St. Joseph, of our history and our present reality. In the middle of the 17th century, the Spirit came upon some women and a Jesuit. Together, they prophesied. They did an ecstatic thing. They believed that the Spirit of the Lord had come not only on them, but on every other person, the dear neighbor, without distinction. Their life was about this, that God would bestow the Spirit on them all, that they were called to a holy communion with God, among themselves, and with every other person. They were called to put their lives at the service of this great mystery, and to take every human means to discover that reality. An indispensable, perhaps the indispensable means to achieve that was basically meeting people where they were, meeting people where they are. We today stand in that grace, in that gift, in that charism. We take some time to sound its depths and perhaps become inspirited. As Beth said, the purpose of this program is renewal in the present. The dynamic is basic and familiar. It's a return to the sources and reading the silent signs of the times. To go back to the sources, our roots, our origins, and read them with some objectivity, at the same time paying attention to our subjectivity, what's happening as we read them. On October 15th of this year, we're going to celebrate the 171st anniversary of the founding of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Le Puy. So let's revisit the story of that beginning, a story we know and we don't know. Let us consider if and what it may speak to us today in October of 2021. This is an etching of the city of Le Puy that was done in 1607 by a Jesuit brother who was a famous architect. And you can see that it's a narrow city, not too big, completely walled around and dominated by the cathedral, where you see the steeple, no, the bell tower, dominating the city. Now, today, the city of Le Puy covers that whole hillside and all of its surroundings, but that's what it looked like when we were established. That's okay. We're going to revisit this story. So, once upon a time, in illo tempore, those phrases actually dissolve the distance between us and the story. They put us into the narrative. And it's important because on the one hand, we have to hear the story on its own terms, or we're going to miss the reality. And on the other, we need to judge whether and what it speaks to one of us who hears it today. So, when the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph was inaugurated on October 15th in 1650, who was there? Why were they there? What were they doing? So who was there? A bishop, a group of women, and a Jesuit. Henri de Maupas was a reforming bishop who was willing to support and validate an experiment, a religious congregation of women whose mission required immediate contact with people outside the community and therefore without enclosure. The group of women were embarking on what was indeed, as their rules said, a new way of life. They had spent several months, we're told, together in the house of their benefactor Lucrèce de la Planche, her house in Le Puy on the Rue Pansac. We could take a look at. We have no portrait of a sister of Saint Joseph, but we do of Lucrèce de la Planche. There she is. If we look at her, we can see that she is a noble, a very wealthy woman. She has all kinds of jewels, and her clothes abound in lace decorations. She's not young, and we know how very wealthy she is because she's holding a pet dog, which was an extreme luxury at that time. And even more so, if you look carefully, you can see peeking out of her pocket a watch. And this, of course, was very new at that time for anyone to have a personal private watch. So she was a benefactor, and we don't know exactly what those sisters did at her house for several months before October 15th, except that they were probably preparing themselves to live a community life. Okay. So what about these women? Of that group, no, I don't need that yet, thank you. Oh, thanks. Of that group, there were 6 of them, we think. None was from the same place. And in fact, they came from 3 different dioceses. We know their name from their formal act of association. Françoise Zéro, who was an experienced administrator and the first superior at Le Puy. Claude Chastel was a widow who brought a dowry and was the only one who at that time knew how to sign her name. Marguerite Berthier, whose family was significant in their own parish, and she would oversee the foundation of numerous houses and be the last founding member to die in 1700. Anna Chalier was the oldest of the group, 46 when they were founded, and we really know nothing about her except her place of origin and that she lived to be 94 years of age. 2 were considered minors according to French law, Anna Brun and Anna Vey. The former was possibly an orphan. No one was anything near nobility, like Lucrèce de la Planche, but they represented a diversity of age, of ability, and social standing. The connection among all of them was a Jesuit, Father Jean-Pierre Médaille. He was then 40 years of age. He had provided these women with an advocate, gave them words to express their aspirations in their founding documents, and proposed a model to structure their religious life. We know from official correspondence that Médaille's involvement in that event on October 15th caused some Jesuits in Le Puy, as Marcia likes to say, to hyperventilate. The women and men just described, what were they there? Why were they there? They were there to launch an experiment in religious life, to launch an experiment, what we call apostolic religious life for women. On that day, Bishop Maupas gave them charge of the girls' orphanage in the Rue Montferrand in Le Puy. That was an action that grounded the community in a precise physical space with specific responsibilities and immediate contact with other persons within and without the house. It was an arena for meeting people where they were, a human space for their calling to a life that Betty Mosslander characterized as a mysticism of relationship. On December 13th, 1651, the following year, the 6 sisters made a legal act of association, putting all their goods in common, likely in preparation for making simple vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The following March, Bishop Maupas granted them official recognition. Those vows and episcopal approbation constituted the community a canonical entity, religious life embedded in the ordinary, and in the indispensable immediate contact with the dear neighbor. We have long known that the community in Le Puy was the first foundation of Sisters of St. Joseph, but in fact it was not. During the previous year, on September 29, 1649, Father Médaille had, quote, given the habit to Anne de Chaux, the first and most determined, those are the words that describe her, to become a Sister of St. Joseph in the village of Dunières. The bishop was not present because Dunières was a different kind of community of Sisters of St. Joseph. The first of what were called country houses, whose members lived very close to their neighbors, dressed like country widows would have, and made private vows requiring no dispensation. The country foundations were Sisters of St. Joseph by virtue of being linked, in French, agrégé, to a city house. The Sœurs agrégées had a religious life similar to those of the city houses, and together both kinds of houses formed the congregation of St. Joseph. We could look at the Dunières slides now, please. Thank you. This is, as you see, the village of Dunières today. A few years ago, Marcia Ellen took these pictures, and on the right you can see the parish church. The house immediately across the street with the TV dish on it is the house that the Sisters of St. Joseph lived in Dunières. Next, the next one, please. That's just a different shot that gives you a better look at the house. And finally, the next one, an idea about the village of Dunières today, which is, of course, much larger than it was at that time. What's important about this business of the city houses and the country houses is that the distinction was really an ingenious plan to cast the net as widely as possible, to make women of different places and conditions able to choose religious life where it otherwise would have been absolutely out of reach. From the beginning, Sisters of St. Joseph had a religious life, as we said, embedded in the ordinary, intertwined with the civil and ecclesiastical structures around them, in a highly stratified society, in order to meet people where they were. In other words, to seek and to find God in all things. And those are my reflections on our beginning. We might ask some questions like, where does this land in you? Does it raise any questions? Curious questions, critical questions? So just think about this story that's in many ways extremely familiar to all of us, and what it meant in that time. And does it ring any bells for me in the present? That's it.
Thank you, Pat. So picking up where Pat left off, Jean-Pierre Médaille left us several documents. We call them the primitive documents. the content of which can sometimes seem opaque because of the 17th century language and the culture, as well as translation challenges. Pat and I firmly believe, however, that they are timely. Thus, we want to present their meaning during these sessions in such a way as to reveal their relevancy to our 21st century life. And much of this will be through the exploration and discovery of the meaning within our own lives and lived experience. So let me start with a little story. Once upon a time when I was very young, a long time ago, ancient history at this point, I happened to be making the Life Institute in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Julie Harkins and the research team were there, and they were translating these documents. And one day, I happened to run into Julie Harkins on a walk. And I said to her, when will we ever learn what a sister of St. Joseph really is? And she said to me so kindly, oh, you will know that when you know who you are. And that was the end of the conversation, as if conversation it was. But I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I knew that that knowing what a sister of St. Joseph was a long way off for me. So what I proceeded to do then was just study the documents when they first finally came out in translation. And so that has been a long journey, and it's an ongoing journey. I'm still learning what the documents say, but I'm also still learning, of course, who I am. So I'm suggesting today that as we look at the documents, we think of them as a mirror. Each time you look into the image, your image in a mirror, it becomes more clear. And we hope you won't be discouraged by the familiarity of the titles of the subject matter. Yes, it looks like something you've heard before, but we hope that you, who are the new texts, will have changed, and that with new ears and eyes and new dialogue partners, we will all discover a whole new meaning, a new depth, a new richness in the meaning of who we are and what we are about at this time and place. So we invite you to enter into the mystery of each of these primitive documents, the original thought of Jean-Pierre Médaille. In it, we will uncover the mystery of God's enormous, infinite capacity, if you will, of love and our almost overwhelming humanity. God and we participating together in the mysterious total double union. Yet this unfolds as inclusive and active love, effecting our mission, goal, and purpose. So that is what we want to explore together. How then are we ever more effective in our world today? How is the mission emerging and unfolding? What does it call us to? Something deeper, something broader? So let's just look at the sequence for a few minutes. Here's what we'll be doing here. November 6th, we'll explore the goal and the purpose of our little institute, as Médaille often called it. In this context, we'll enter into the profound mystery of the inner dynamic that moves us to what we call the more. So we'll need the document, the Reglement. On December 4, then we move into finding God in all things. And we ask that each of you have a personal copy of Joan Rocasalvo's little book, Finding God in All Things. And that can be procured at the website once you get your bibliography, and you'll receive that soon after this session. But what we want to look for there is a mysticism of relationship. In January, we'll focus on the maxims of the Little Institute. What Médaille said was, we can hardly live the goal and the purpose unless we understand our own spirit and spirituality. And that, of course, is found in the 100 maxims, he said, about 100 maxims. And we often call them just the 100 maxims. But they are the description of our foundational spirituality. Then in February, the focus is on the key points in the Constitution. What we want to do is look at the Congregation of the Great Love. If you remember, we often call ourselves that, the Congregation of the Great Love. And we focus on the key points in the Constitution that enable us to become just that. Not just as individuals, but as a congregation. In March, then, we'll move on to the Eucharistic letter. In that, the letter is a mystical text. And at that time, we will come to the challenge of the mystery of relationship, not just in ourselves, but for the congregation itself. What does it mean for the whole institute? And finally, in April, we'll explore all that we've discovered and explored, and hope to integrate it all more deeply and find ourselves motivated to live it more radically in our 21st century world. So we will always be asking the question and talking among ourselves about what it means, these particular themes mean as we move through them in our lived experience. Sometimes just personally and sometimes communally. But all in all, what we hope from these sessions is a growing sense of identity and purpose as a community of St. Joseph, so that we can more truly be who we are and do who we are. The future, as we know, takes place in the present. Whatever we're doing today is a portent of what we will do in the future. So our text today is extremely vital. And we put it, as Pat said, at the service of this great mystery. And that will lead us into a transformation of our inner and outer selves. And hopefully even more meaningful in the day to come, the days to come. Thank you. Now, Beth, over to you.
And I shouldn't be able to hear it. Now what happened?
Well, if you're like me, nervous about the technology, let me first say that if you can't find the documents, the primitive documents, they're all going to be online with the Federation within a week. And also Joan is going to be sending them out to all of us. So we can all be calm about that, at least I be calm. So what we'll be sending you is an access to material sheet the coming week, and also an updated session sheet. So our part of the sheet, this is more exciting than the access to material sheet. So we just lifted some things. And of course, you know already that there'll be many of us watching these on live Zoom, and there'll be many watching the recordings, or I know right now I want to go back and look at the recording already to relish some of the things that Pat and Marcia have said. So the documents, and then Pat and Marcia have a general bibliography, which will be on the Federation website, and also the materials and readings and the reflection question, which is going to be the same for each session, will be sent to you by Pat mid-month. So that will be coming. There'll be a reminder about the next meeting. And then a number of people worried about where's the link, where's the link. The link for the respective meetings will come out the Friday morning before. And then we will be using, again, it might be a tool new to you, a Survey Monkey, and you don't have to worry about that because it'll be coming to you as the time comes, for you to send back to us all of your reflections on the questions that would be presented to us, be presented to you, because we want to gather all these materials together toward a final report assessment of has the Spirit worked, how's the Spirit worked, and from every one of our reflections on what's going on. So I don't know if there's any more we need to say with that. No, yeah. So as always, my name, I'm probably the worst one to deal with technology, but my name and email are on all the sheets for you to call me. So I try to get back to you with responses as I can. And if I can't, I'll get back to Joan. So anyway, the materials will be coming and they will be accessible to us. So I end by saying that early in our planning meetings, Marcia made the statement that today we all are novices. There is no roadmap ahead. There's no novice directress to tell us things. We are the novices. So I raise your hand if you've been part of any novitiate class of 300 or more. Anybody? So here we are, this marvelous, marvelous novitiate class. And we can all think back to those young days, those of us who are older, and how we were as novices, and then see how alive we are today. So Pat and Marcia will lead us into history, as they said, the moments, the stories, the documents, the words, the founding gift of charism, and bring us back to today. The hope for us novices, you ready? Got pads to write it down, type it up. The hope for us novices, united in a unique spiritual quest, is that we, as Marcia said, we develop the class content, as together we return to our founding and discover today's shoots. We hope for a rooted living dynamism, pointing to a more clearly articulated path ahead, a spirit-directed way for us individually and together in service to today's neighbors. Now, as I was preparing this, I've done once in the past, I went to the computer and typed up some belief statements. So this is what follows. I believe in these signs as we gather for these moments. I believe because of your enthusiastic communications by phone and email, expressing sure and deep interest in this type of spiritual journey together, and the numbers registering. I believe because of the immediate yeses of Marcia Allen and Pat Byrne to provide grounded sustenance for this journey. And the yes of Joan Gallagher to be host and overseer of the newly minted, at least newly minted for most of us, technologies that can unite us across congregations and nations. And you haven't heard these names yet, but the yes of Sheila Bridey, Rochester, Kathy McClusker, Boston, and Carol Quinlivan, Los Angeles, to facilitate our discernment process toward our last April session. And yes, the yes, and yes, the hosts, the yes of other hosts and our facilitators. I believe in our reflective attentiveness to the core roots of our foundational history and attentiveness to the movements, dynamics, large and small, that will stir within us individually and collectively. And I believe in our sharing, listening, and hopefully naming the Spirit at work among us. I believe that at the end of our common commitment to these days ahead, we will know how to care for the fragile spiritual and ministerial shoots that will call us to tend them. And perhaps each of us in this community of Joseph gathered today, and those watching the recordings, will recognize the gifts of the Spirit to be eagerly shared with each other and with the dearest neighbor in the neighborhood that is our world. As I prepared the beginning prayer based on the maxims, I found myself repeating, may we, if you remember the prayer, may we this, may we, may we. And all of a sudden the words turned into the French words that sound the same, but have another meaning. So may we became may we, meaning but yes. May I suggest these words serve as a call that we might surrender to this journey expectantly, but bowing humbly and simply before the next steps, rendering but yes to discoveries along the way. And I conclude with a litany for our congregations. May we tend to each one of our congregations, the sisters and those who are joining us in so many ways. May we lift them up in their need and in their grace. Albany, Baden, we missed Baden, Boston, Brentwood. Oh, there it is, the other side. Thank you, Joan. Albany, Baden, Boston, Brentwood, Buffalo, Concordia, Congregation of St. Joseph, Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Canada, Los Angeles, Leon, Maine, Northwestern Pennsylvania, Orange, Peru, Philadelphia, Rochester, Sault Ste. Marie, Springfield, St. Augustine, St. Louis, St. Paul, Toronto, Watertown. And maybe we could just pause silently in prayer over all that we know about our own congregations, all of our needs, all of our graces, and what we know are those of might or might not know, those of other congregations. So may we know holy journey before us. And I think we can go back to our chit chats for a bit. So thank you very much, all of you, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you in multiple ways as we go forward.